Between English and German. Do this very quickly. My best friend, Hazelbun, is going to talk about the sweetest, most awesome thing since sliced bread. And that's what I think too. Linus, Torsten, and Martin on the PC Election Act. So the title is Analysis of Some Election Software. Good evening, everyone. We're glad for you to be here to listen to our talk. I am Linus. My hobbies are writing, swimming, reading, and hacking. I'm Torsten, and I like breaking things. And I'm Martin from Darmstadt today, and I'm an interested citizen. Thanks. Yeah, and that's your applause, Martin. We brought an election program along, and we're going to show you some scenarios.
We're going to show you some scenarios of attack and going to try to show you how we fix them as well. So what do we need electoral software for? Because you elect on piece of papers here in Germany, right? Well, you have to organize the elections, you have to register them, and you have to also understand the final results. So 70,000 electoral offices are involved within the elections out of 16 counties in Germany. There is constituencies, there's electoral districts who are then distributing the votes to the district returning officer, who then passes on the votes to the state election commissioner, and all in all of these steps are being taken, and then they finally reach the temporary election results, and that's a few hours after the voting booths are closed, before the then final results are being drawn for the next day. So once elections are being counted, and if we would do all of these on paper through the whole entire time, we would take days and days and days, about 10 days. So that's why it makes sense to use software for this. And well, because we're in a federal state, every county has their preferred way of doing things. So what we did was we looked at one of these softwares, the software called PC Wahl, which by the producer of the software is apparently being used in lots and many counties within Germany, and is responsible for about 33 billion votes within the country. So there's also alternatives like evu.elect, which has been dissected by our our colleagues from Netherlands, people like Vote Manager or OK Elect, etc., etc. In Quality Land, everything is fine. We're hinting at the reading that we just listened to beforehand. So what is this kind of electoral software? There's computers doing results, and then these results are being made public. So let's look at this software. So there was a young man who then went to the
he went to the Supreme Court, and here it's enough if the state commissioner is looking at it, and no one understands it anyway, so why would anyone hack an election? So we got that software somehow. Those are screenshots from the vendor. Of course, we could have made them ourselves, but our first reaction was, wow. The logo is actually not made by us, you know? It was clear up front that is not going to be pleasant. Okay, we can give them that. The risk that it's going to get hacked is still a lot less than just misusing it or going mad over trying to use it. So here you can see how a county election is administered. Here you can see how the votes are getting counted. Don't miss the part of the interface where it's coloring the districts that haven't been counted yet in red. And here's a check where it adds up some numbers and then tries to match them up. And if they don't match, then it's giving you the chance to just correct it until it matches up. But there is a concept for running it securely. They're obviously interested in security of operation. Obviously, we need it, like gloves and hard hats, and the vendor is actually advertising its database-free concept. What does that mean? Yeah, they actually write files into a file system, and what they do is they write them redundantly, and it's written redundantly in the way that it just writes them in two different formats, in two different folders, and that's called redundant. And you can actually synchronize it via the synchronization feature. You can actually sync them between a remote location and here, and that's going to be interesting. So in the end, they're all just writing their files onto an SMB share, and then they just go. So let's look at threat scenarios here.
Man könnte, also böse Zungen behaupten, wir haben uns das nur angeschaut, weil es uns einfach...
So evil tongues claim that we only looked at this because it was bothering us and that we'd think that Russia would hack our elections. So then we were like, well, let's look at how they could do this. So there's two modes. There's temporary results, and then there is the actual official results that are being publicized 10 days later. What we're looking at is the preliminary results. The official results for the elections, the governmental elections in Germany this year, came in 18 days later. So how does a hacker think about looking at this? And Martin preferably likes to explain this, our interested citizen. Well, I was interested in this. Well, I mean, obviously you have to have the right circumstances. This year we had the governmental elections and the apparent existent problems with the electoral software itself. All right, so this electoral data is being transferred in a chain from county to district, from district to county. So what happens in a district on the night of election? The returning district official gets all the votes from the electoral districts, and an SMB share is started, and then all of them type in the results from the electoral offices, from the voting booths. So those are then being uploaded into the internet onto an FTP server. There's an FTP server, and that collects all the results from the districts. And that is located in the internet, in the federal state of Hessen. It's being made available by Ecom21, and Ecom21 is like a local system administration office. And they provide basically on how to upload the data onto the FTP server. And they were alongside these instructions were the login data to understand how to then upload, providing all security credentials, encrypted, but providing the decryption within the same upload. So what do you need to execute this attack? You need Google, because you need to Google for Hessen, and then you need the text editor, and a debugger is quite helpful if you want to get in to the nitty-gritty, into the depth of things. And all of this basically gives you the possibility to access the FTP server. And we looked at this FTP server, and there's elections that go back many, many years, like smaller elections, communal elections, other governmental elections from the past years. And the login data are located on the server. You just need the local IP address. You can see on the slides the login data as well as the password, and all you basically then need to then access is, well, let's call it a VPN. The beautiful thing about this is that the electoral elections, the governmental elections 2017 were obviously only a test. All right, and this is how we had the federal state of Hesse. Everything was done. Well, not really. What's missing?
So there's some other attack scenarios that gives you opportunities to get access to the FTP server, configuration data to get access to them. For instance, this update mechanism. How does the system distribute the updates to the various electoral districts where the software is being used? And we learned that this is quite an exciting field with these updates in the big bad internet. We've found this server where all the updates and everything are on it. And after looking at this stuff, we found it at least 4 vulnerabilities that have allowed us to modify files on the server. And that means that we were able to overwrite update files or delete them. So the advantage of distributing updates is that you don't have to rely on people having passwords on the internet, but you can do this centrally for all states. It's a lot easier, but Mr. Berninger, the developer of this software, who started back in the 90s, who started developing this back in the 80s. Sorry, he corrected himself, the 80s. And he said, you need lots of brain power to crack all this encryption and compression stuff that he figured out, because of course he made sure that you couldn't just replace stuff. So that means that this file PCW 10dat1.010 is an encrypted file, and this encrypted file is in a zip archive, and this zip archive, there's another file in it or something like that, you know. So these Russian dollars, it takes lots of brain power, you know. So we figured that out. You can see an excerpt of a little code that we we threw this thing at a disassembler and stuff, and you know, got to all this Delphi code and found a key and an encryption method, decryption method. And so we built our own tool that could decompress these files and build in our own files into it, so that we could our own updates. With the decrypt tool, we can, like this Studio.X, the kind of core of this software platform, the wonderful UI we were just seeing, you can patch it so that you can exchange election results or other naughty things like that. And the other tool that we built, a new update file builder, just with another command line switch. It's not working. Wait.
Create neues Update-Paket.
-C, create new update package.
Server im großen bösen Internet stellen.
And so we could put that on the big bad internet on this server that we found. And so that was uploaded and distributed onto all these servers. And we uploaded it to GitHub so everyone could use it. And the most awesome thing about this, the genius thing about this, and so on the other side they have to decrypt the files. How much brain power do we need? 300 grams of brain power, maybe? I don't know, it could have been 180 grams.
Okay, also was wollen wir also machen?
So what are we going to do after we've patched these files? Well, because the communication channels are encrypted,
weil die böse Krypto macht immer sonst alles so kompliziert. Bei der Manipulation ist das ähnlich, deswegen haben wir diese
the cryptography makes it complicated.
Kommunikationsmanipulation da platziert.
And so we put then we put all the nasty stuff in the source telecommunications manipulation before the encryption happens. And so it passes it on to the next level. And there are these party IDs, and the format we'll get to later. And then we put this as a proof of concept. We just swap out party 1 and 2, exchanging the votes.
That was one aspect. In the threat scenarios, there's a few further ones, like data format, so config files that are being used by the software, config files that are being supplied before every election, they're being put out, and machines are being then updated, and these data is obviously online available as well, and they're part of the regular update package, having all the update files with all the login data, and they also use PGP. And because they obviously don't make it stuff easy for hackers, they obviously encrypted things, but we obviously also hack that. Yeah, there's different formats. They haven't just relied on one type of encryption. They used various forms of encryption. Makes sense, or maybe it doesn't. There's one version that was part of the encryption number 1, which means we're just basically not using a secret key at all. I mean, you can do that, but you gotta have a risk taker. All right, so that's the code that's basically got kicked out of the disassembler. That wasn't a lot of fun. And then there's obviously a second form. This is what they use for passwords and usernames for GPG passphrases. There's a byte of key, a whole byte, at least. And that's being used to then decrypt the config data, and we just did that and put that on GitHub as well, so you can check that out and try it and just, give it a shot. And now Linus is gonna continue on the formats, because all of these are not unimportant if we want to show how we then in practice use this to hack. As Martin has said and pointed out, he had access to the FTP server, at least in Essen, so we can manipulate the binaries to have different results and export those differently. But if you have access to the FTP server, you can also write your own files. And we're looking at the XML format that were showing the preliminary results and marking them. That was highly complex in naming the data files. These index-free database means that files have clear names, and at the end there's a server that counts these. And this is what basically a data file looks like, containing an XML file containing the preliminary results from the electoral districts. So if you look at these XML files, so what's missing? And what I was looking and searching for was like some sort of form of signature that says who counted these. Like, on the paper you always have kind of like a written thing on the bottom, this is the person that counted it. On the XML file, that's lacking and non-existent. So another feather in the crown of the democracy. So it was clear we publicized this before elections, with giving them a good 2-3 weeks to address these issues, and we're like, you're going to be able to fix that, right? So we publicized a report. We only took some of the cream of the crop stuff that we actually did. The actual report is about 24 or 25 pages long, and we publicized that, and we told the government, look, software isn't safe, and there's obviously a long passage result outlining basically a plan of what to do. And we sat there and we publicized that. And then in the evening we looked at the news report, and we were interested citizens, and we looked at the news, and to our surprise, we saw we're watching the news report now, and the guy's just reporting on
basically he's rehashing what we just heard. The Federal Election Commissioner spoke of a serious problem, but there's nothing to be worried about.
Und ich dachte so, boah, der ist echt.
So I was thinking, wow, that was fast.
Mal gucken.
Well, let's see.
Mal auf die Update-Seite schauen.
So let's look at the updated page.
Vom 7. September, wo wir veröffentlicht haben.
That was from the date when we published.
Letzte Version vom 9. September, vom 5. September.
We took the latest version from the 5th of September, and that was the
Das ist aber komisch, weil es Nachbesserungen gab,
the target of our investigation. And
Und dann dämmert
how would
es,
that happen?
wahrscheinlich meinen die,
So
die Nachbesserung,
now that we thought about it,
der gemacht hat,
maybe
während wir ihn vor Veröffentlichung unseres Berichts
they were thinking that the prepublicated stuff that we gave the vendor was used for the fixes, and that this was the fix that they were talking about.
Verwendung des
So
Traditionszeichen
there was now implemented as an MD5 self-check that, as you all know, is very secure. Also, the word self-check is great because, I mean, if you have a manipulated file, how's that going to check itself? So, at the 5th of September, they added the digital signature of the program and the GPT signature of the payload. And every time we saw it, we basically thought, finally they... Oh wow, they fixed it. And then minutes later we're like, oh no, why would you do that?
YOLO!
The answer always seems to be YOLO. So...
Aber Spaß beiseite, wir brauchen zwei zentrale Dinge gefordert, signierte Software-Updates und signierte Ergebnisse.
We basically demanded two things. Signed updates and signed results. So a lot of the more tricky problems would be really simple to fix if we have a secure version of the software that's deployed on the update page, and then we would basically have a good starting point that we can start off with. But what we saw was that they implemented the self-test in the executable. And this is part of our patch program now. We can see what we have to do before we can manipulate the election data. So now we have to change 2 bytes in the self-check, and we have to have another function that swaps the data for 2 parties. And then we already passed the self-test or removed it, whichever way you want to think about it. So later, when we were basically firefighting and being in headless chicken mode, with the last patch, where we were thinking, oh, finally, maybe they got it. They failed so many times, now they must have gotten it. So we were on the road, and then later in the hotel at night, we looked at it, and yeah, it only took us a short time again, and then I then Twittered a proof of concept that showed that it was vulnerable again, and so let's make it prettier again. This is what the software updater of the software PC Wahl looks like now that I look at it again. There is the update from the 13th of September, and we have fully signed update packages, which is still just used and didn't barfen. Yeah, Macs always give us trouble. Wouldn't have happened with Windows. So here, you can see how we use this election studio or Wahl Studio. It asks you, do you want to check the signature of PC Wahl? So I have to be a little faster now.
Hier gibt es jetzt ein
So
Programmaktualisierungs.
here there's a program update, and there's a manual now or an information how to verify the integrity of the update. So let's have a very close look. Too fast.
So, das ist genau, das ist schon unser modifiziertes.
This is already our modified binary.
Mach mal
And
Pause oder so.
let's pause this so we can see what it showed.
So signieren sie ihre
This is
digitalen
their method for signing their
Update-Pakete.
update
Sie wollen,
packages.
dass man dieses komische PC-Wahl-Paketpunkt
They want you to
Rechtsklick
open
sich die Eigenschaften
or
anguckt.
to look at the properties of the studio executable.
Dann doppelklicken auf den
There you double click on the name of the company,
ob hier steht, die digitale Signatur ist gültig.
and then you have to have a look if it says this signature is valid.
Was dann passiert,
What happens then is
Allein die Idee,
the idea alone, the idea by itself.
definierte Updates ja machen wir, aber das zu prüfen muss der Nutzer machen.
Yeah, we'll just have signed updates, but the user still has to verify manually.
Paket.exe ist
So what happens is the executable of PC Wahl is not an installer. It's more of a hello world program.
dann geht nur ein Fenster auf und da steht
It
drinne,
opens up a window
dieses Programms muss
and
gültig
it
sein.
says the signature of this executable has to be valid,
Format als
because
Container benutzt.
they have used an executable file format
Da haben sie dann dieses
as a container, and in the resources
010
they added
und das ein anderes Programm
PC Wahl 10 as a string in there in resources.
Paket und installiert das, nachdem man natürlich
Und
gesagt hat, ja, ja, ist gültig.
Then the executable itself installs itself.
Ach, du mal.
So
Also sie
All
haben
right, you can see they did a great job at worse bettering this.
wir klicken da jetzt auf digitale Signaturen.
Okay, we're clicking on digital signature. This looks great, doesn't it?
Signatur.
I mean, it's a perfect signature. Great, just valid. Great, that's good.
So, und jetzt
Great, approved.
muss man sagen,
And now you have to say, yes, signature was valid. And you click OK. Great. And now
haben wir
you have,
natürlich
of course, to demonstrate our proof of concept that we included our own software. We let
das, was
a red pop-up window come into, and
so jetzt gar nicht
yeah.
sehen, was wir
So obviously this was our inception of our manipulated software. Oh, you have to press one more time.
die signierten Ergebnisdaten.
All right, the signed results, data results, is another aspect that we demanded as a fix.
Entschlossen,
They decided
die
to
Ergebnisse des XML-Dateien zu signieren.
sign the XML result files that we looked at before.
PGP.
So what do? Somebody told them, just use PGP.
Managt irgendwie auch die Keys.
Nobody told them that you have to manage the keys. So it's completely unclear how they will pass around the keys. So is there a key that's being shared amongst all the counties? We don't know. We never found out, just to kind of show the
Wahllokalen.
extent. This is like 70,000.
Ja auch ein bisschen an seine Grenzen.
Wer importiert die ganzen
So,
Public Keys, wenn die sich tatsächlich
who
selber alles generieren?
maintains all these public keys if they all generate themselves? I mean, at least in the
Die Daten signieren. Da steht nichts drin, so schick den Key irgendwo.
instructions, it says install Cleopatra, but you still have to decide if you use PGP or GNU-PG, if you use
in die Software direkt mit reinlegen,
PGP
oder ob man ein externes
ME, or if you use an external program.
für was
They decided for what?
rufen, das als externes Programm
Oh, they'll use it an external program, so they'll generate
extra einen neuen Prozess.
as part of the Studio executable file.
Manche lachen jetzt.
Some of you might laugh already. There is this GPG command line, --batch, --, passphrase. This is then followed by the passphrase. Don't laugh too early, it's going to get better.
Also in dem Fall.
All right, so you can see if the GPG, if you then enter the passphrase in command line within the user, you obviously see the passphrase,
Das ist halt viel besser. Sie haben nämlich
and it's even better. It gets better. They don't just create a new process with GPG2.x execution. They want to know what key do we want to use to sign this file. So you've got to have like a drop-down election selection menu, basically. So they generate a batch file where they then have the GPG parameters that then open all the secret keys that then are being written into a text file, and this text file is being accessed by the program itself, and it then checks for the private keys, and after that, they create a new batch file with what we just saw now. They then write the passphrase and the whole command line of how to sign stuff into the batch file. They don't just create a new process, they also write it in clear writing into the system itself, so that everybody in the future can possibly access this. And this file is obviously saved. You remember? Yeah, you remember? The binaries and all of these are in the file share? Yeah. On the file share, you can then find all the PGP keys in a text file. Crazy, isn't it? It's a lot more easy to then continue having like an overview.
So besides that, we've already showed that these passphrases are in the IDI files, and as how awesome that has been encrypted, we've also seen. So yeah, just so that you can appreciate that. Of course, all of this is on GitHub. There's nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide.
Nun, also das haben jetzt nicht nur wir festgestellt.
All right, not just us who figured this, figured out that this was, or determined that it was broken beyond repair. The state election officials have decided that it was broken beyond repair. And so, what do you do if you, if it doesn't work? Print it out, and it's not public.
Mit Ausführungsbestimmungen veröffentlichen. Da steht drin, wie sie es machen müssen, die Gemeinden. Und da steht drin, wenn die Wahlergebnisse...
Okay, so if the results were uploaded to the FTP server and then passed on and so on and so on, what do you do then? Please go onto the internet, go onto the website of the official statistic offices. Please compare it to your results, stamp it and print it out, put it in a folder, and that's how you test on yourself. Everything's been done manually, and it goes back to the Stone Age, basically. But you could nuke a bit more, obviously. I mean, we wanted to help. That was our main objective. So we thought about this, and we're like, oh, there are multiple updates, and everyone's like, oh, we're fixing things. And then Torsten really wanted to do something else, but then he had to go back, do another half hour of tweeting and reverse engineering, and we're like, oh, let's just stop this. We want to have an election. All right, we'll just fix it ourselves, and then donate the fix for the updater to the producer as an open source package, just to show it's possible. A round of applause.
Und da geht's dann also einfach darum.
And I mean, we just wanted to it's just like a standard installer. It's not like rocket science, to have an installer that then checks if the update package is signed. I mean, the installer itself knows, and it checks the certificate, and then it checks whether or not the certificate is valid and where the source is from. I mean, there's not really that much to do, is there? I mean, it's a little donation. A small donation, a small step for the CCC, a big step for PC Wahl. But, I mean, it was clear from the get-go that they would not really welcome this donation. I mean, fair enough. It's not a piece of software that they could just put into their program and implement it. I mean, they're using this super modern program languages. I mean, I wrote that down in C# because I like to use this as a prototype. I mean, I wanted to just demonstrate that with very simple means and crypto libraries, you can very quickly implement a routine that is a lot safer to fend off very brute force attacks. And I mean, the producer realized that they weren't really getting anywhere with their own updates and they couldn't take our donation. So they were like, how are we going to end this? Oh, we'll just not give any more updates. So the most recent update for PC Wahl is not being released through the website anymore. It's only being made accessible by the producer itself. If you want to have it, please, please get in touch with the supervisor, that is actually the term they use, or the counselor at PC Wahl. So if you want to update now, you have to get in touch with the producer of the software itself. I mean, they knew that whatever they bring out, we're going to break it. I mean, they could have taken our donation, and then we would have welcomed that. But I mean, in what kind of circumstance? I mean, we're very shortly before a governmental election, roughly a week before the elections. So the old versions are out there, remaining weak with all the vulnerabilities. I mean, it's very clear that most of these district offices are not going to get in touch with their PC Wahl supervisor, and they're not getting any more patches, they're not getting more updates. So the path for updating is being further complicated, and so then now all of a sudden we're getting calls from these offices, and they were like, so what kind of one did you hack? And then they would be like, which version? And then we'd be like, well, the most recent one. And they were like, well, what is the most recent one? And then they will be like, 3rd of August 2013. Is that fine? Is that good? And they were like, no, that's obviously not. Don't. I mean, I can't honestly, it's so irresponsible. So let's talk about the results, the conclusions of this.
Rob Gongreib and Alex Halderman haben schon häufiger gesagt,
Rob Gongreib and Alex Halderman said in the past, I mean,
die noch als sicher gelten, die sind, die wir uns noch nicht angeschaut haben.
It's kind of a coincidence that the only known concepts are the only ones remaining that we haven't really looked at. I mean, we've looked at electronic processes of election, but there's another aspect in this kind of technical construct that we're looking at. It's the encryption aspect of it. You should look at not violating Kerckhoffs's principles. I mean, that shouldn't be something that should be said out loud. It should be something that you understand and know. If you develop an encryption process, that you do not develop it yourself, but that you rely on established and well-rounded processes of encryption, and that are not then being insecure just because they get thrown into the wrong hands. A round of applause from the audience for this. What we now saw was the reactions of the producer of the software, but I mean the consumer, the client of the software in this case is obviously the electoral officers, the state election commissioners. And what we saw on their end was just as appalling and alarming. I mean, we're part of a community, so we try to address the people in the community. So we just try to address this issue on a communal level. And here we have the district returning officer of this electoral district in Hessen. And he said, well, manipulation is obviously possible. You showed this and you demonstrated this. This is upsetting. but
Juckt uns nicht so richtig.
it doesn't really bother us.
Das ist
It
der Ausdruck,
leaves me
den man
cold.
eigentlich, hätte plakativ nehmen können für den
And I mean, this is honestly what we could have used as like a claim put on this kind of lecture. And that's really what I find concerning. And that was really surprising to me, to be honest. I didn't really see that coming.
Ja, es gibt bessere Passworte als Tests.
I mean, yeah, there's obviously better passwords than tests.
Dafür hat er uns dazu gestanden.
That is one thing that he gave us.
Manipulation der Software sei zumindest
He said that manipulation of software is at least disturbing. They admitted that. But
selber gab es noch den Bemerkung,
from the developer of this software,
keine Relevanz.
he said that yeah, it was bothering and it was confusing, but it doesn't really have any relevance.
Entschieden widersprechen.
And I'm sorry, but we have to disagree on this on every level possible.
So absolut nicht.
Also,
That is just not true. I'm honestly so surprised what kind of
Arbeit nachgehen. Wenn ich doch für eine Wahl verantwortlich bin, dann hätte ich gedacht, dass mich das mehr interessiert.
And I thought if this were my job, I thought I would be more interested in that stuff, you know, interested that there's a result that we can rely on. And this anger and confusion that, however, had no relevance. And we checked how long did it take of this problems and confusion. We called some people and asked, do y'all remember this parliamentary election? This is disturbing,
Auch nicht weiter schlimm.
but not that bad.
Nach 18 Tagen, also wir haben mal hier
After 18 days,
was da passiert ist.
um,
Nach 18
we have a little depiction of how long that stuff came. And after 18 days, the discussions
an dem Vertrauen in die
of the making coalitions, and how all of this was.
gezeigt wurden, wurde eigentlich sogar noch mit der
I mean, we showed the risk basically of what happened in between the 18 days between the preliminary results and the actual results. I mean, we had coalition talks already, like coalition talks not having any success. So imagine the kind of damage to democracy could have been done within those 18 days.
Aber es ging noch weiter.
But I mean, it goes beyond that.
Das Bundesamt für Sicherheit und Informationstechnik wurde natürlich auch von
The official office for information in Germany,
also so ungefähr stelle ich mir das vor, ne? Und
were asked, and we're like, well, what's this? Like, what's this about?
dann tritt
And then
Arne Schönbohm, der Chef des
Arne Schönbohm, the head of the information security offices, stands in front of the press and he says, great that you're pointing that out again. We would like for the next election to have completely electronic processes because that is a very safe way of electing. And that was the second that I thought, like, are you being, like, I honestly, there's nothing I could think of anymore. You really ask yourself, why? Why?
Weil die haben jahrelang
Because
Erfahrung
they
mit
have years of experience with elections.
die Gefahr ist bei weitem
And,
nicht gebannt. Es ist ja so,
I mean,
seit
the
Jahren
threat
wird
is
Wahlsoftware gehackt, seit Jahren
still
wird
there for years and years. Voting machines, voting software are being hacked, and there's always problems with electronic software. And then there's
der von dem Hersteller für diese Wahlsoftware in
a lobbying party that
Ziel hat,
has the goal to
aktiv mit der weiteren Entwicklung
actively involve themselves within the process of our
Nutzung von
election laws.
im Rahmen der weiteren Digitalisierung der Gesellschaft.
So
Da
genau-
sind dann auf einmal
Yes.
Ambitionen vorhanden.
Well, now there's ambition there, you know?
diese Software hier zu verantworten.
Those are exactly the people who actually are responsible for this kind of software. And those people are now in charge. So we're currently debating whether we're going to also narrate this one, but yeah, I think we just got to tell you.
Uns ist irgendwie aufgefallen, dass
So we noticed that
das PC Wahl schien irgendwie die Software, die Webseite
PC Wahl
einen Firmennamen zu existieren.
seemed to, the website seemed to exist
Anderen Unternehmen.
being made by one company, and the actual software is being made by the other one. And if you now start Googling, I think one is called Vote IT,
Dass die
and
seinen Konkurrenten Berninger Software
Vote IT actually bought its competitor, Banninger. Banninger is the developer who was uttering those great statements about needing a lot of brain power to crack this. And that guy, 2 years before we started attacking the software, he basically sold his own company for a 7-figure number and still continued as a CEO kind of figure or CTO kind of figure for the new company. So I kind of have the impression that he probably doesn't get a lot of sleep at night, mainly because he's laughing at it.
So macht man's richtig.
That's how you do it.
Also den gesamten Schaden hat natürlich jetzt.
So obviously the buyer has the complete damage.
Kommen wir zu unseren politischen
So let's get to our demand as Chaos Computer Club. Whenever we break something, we always demand things, and obviously this is in order here. So if you want to look at the speed up of the processes, this should never ever impact the security and the accountability during the election process. But this is what we always saw.
Das mussten wir nicht knacken, das war
We didn't even have to hack it. It was basically broken from the start. There's nothing to do there.
Transparenz ist wirklich was anderes.
Transparency is definitely nothing you can exhibit by this program. Basically, they just killed their own update process and then just gave you account representative that you could call. That's just not an update process. So no software component that is involved in the election process and in the transmission of the voting results should ever be kept secret. We should always be able to inspect it, and it should be public.
Es ist durch eine völlig unabhängige zeitliche Koinzidenz.
It is, of course, completely coincidental that in September there has been a campaign by the Free Software Foundation that was saying if there's public money that's involved, then the code should always be open and should be available to us.
Das dürfte dann auch potenzielle Entwickler von einem Open Source Projekt
This should also get programmers of current open source software motivation to actually use modern crypto software, modern libraries, and modern programming languages. Mainly because there's always going to be the review process, and there's a way to tell the vendor to say, you know, this hashing algorithm that you're using is crap. Just can we just do it away? Or this review process definitely has to undergo a process of verification and review. And not to least, so the software developer actually puts in some effort in order to make it secure. If there are audit results, then those results should also be public. They should be publicized with the software source code. Can't be that hard. I mean, just think about it. How many billion euros, or those were the Banninger software was bought. You will find a lot of software developers with modern languages that can do a lot better job than that.
There was somebody yelling from the audience. I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that through the microphones here.
Mit quelloffenem Code, schön
So
Ergebnissen von den Wahlleitern.
Everything open, signed, a lot of verification, X509 certificate by the Central Office of Information Security. There's no reason why any part of the selection process should not be verifiable by us. So we only looked at the security of this single piece of software, and we didn't even look at if the results that it produces are correct. We only looked at the security aspect. So we thought that the time we allotted for sort of time after work that we want to spend on this voluntarily is over for this year, maybe later. So in any case, an open source software project, if we initiate it or someone else or the FSF, would be a good example that we, Germans or whoever, who always think that we're a good democracy, a functioning democracy, we could show them, or we could show our neighbors with a lot less money than us, that we can actually produce something sensible in this space, and that we have a reasonable election process and modern technology involved. But then look at the FDP. That's the Liberal Party of Germany. It means think first, digital second. There's also stickers around if you want to have a look. So this is our end. You can find all of our attacking tools on GitHub. There's the report on CCCD and our press release. There's also our email addresses here, but we wouldn't want to let you go without a firework of good humor. This is a feature of the software itself. They basically gave it to us on a platter. It's the most bug-free feature of the software. It only works with a decent hardware. Thanks a lot, guys.
Ja.
You can applaud more in the end, but first we want to get to the questions. Anybody's got questions, get to the microphones as quick as you can because we're already over time. But we have 10 minutes. All right, microphone number 3. Hello. I would like to know what the software costs the commune, the
Too much is the answer. I assume they pay for all this using contracts that includes all these files that are passed around. And so you can Google these purchase results needed to be checked using cartel law, so monopoly law.
All right, a question from the internet. All right, hello. All right, the internet would like to know if anything has changed after the elections. Are there fundamental consequences? Is there anything that happened?
There was a delay in the assessment of the results of the election. I think Brandenburg is still relying on PC Wahl in a changed version. Berlin, Brandenburg, there were delays, but the reason for that was never published.
Bisher ist aber noch niemand gezielt auf uns zugekommen und hat gesagt, so hey, wie kriegen wir denn...
Nobody has addressed on how can we get this better or how can we resolve the issues. Question on mic 2. Have you ever tried to call a district and say that you were gonna be giving advice and give them be their consultant and supply them with new updates?
No, that's not allowed. We'd use our time, we'd prefer to use that time to look at the other parts. It's just 33 million votes. There's a few of those left.
On mic 3, did I understand this correct, that there's people that they have their software being compliant with their version of 2013?
That's not that difficult with this software. It really, the software just really looks like backward compatible. Or backwards, maybe.
Clients verschiedenster Versionen an dem gleichen.
I mean, it seems possible that there's clients from different versions who can work on the same data file.
I would say it's more about forward compatibility is the word.
Letzte Frage aus dem Internet.
And one final question from the internet. Yes, the internet would like to know if you looked at Vote Manager from the same software house.
We had a look after the first cross-site scripting vulnerability. We stopped looking.
So, und das wär's dann auch schon für diesen Talk.
All right, and that was it for the talk. You listened to the PC Wahl Hack done by Linus